It is a strange paradox, is it not, that what weighs us down is often the very thing that leads us onward? A traveler with a heavy pack bends low, shoulders aching, feet sore, yet without that burden, he might forget that he is on a journey at all. The discomfort reminds him of his destination. So it is with the Christian soul. The burden of sin awakens us to grace. The weight of suffering presses us toward eternity. Even our noblest duties, love, prayer, obedience, though they sometimes feel like yokes upon our necks, are in fact the very cords that tether us to the road of salvation. Thus, the burden is not merely a hindrance but a signpost. We stumble under it, yet it compels us to look up. Without it, we might grow careless and never set our faces toward the celestial city. I have often thought that the Christian life is best pictured as a pilgrimage, a long and winding road whose destination is the shining country where all wrongs are set right and all sorrows turned into joy. This road, however, is not one of leisure. The pilgrim does not travel empty-handed. Upon his back is a burden, and though the form of that burden differs for each soul, none are without it. Indeed, were you to see a man striding lightly without weight or care, you might suspect that he has mistaken the way entirely. The burden first appears as guilt. We cannot escape the truth that we have gone astray, each turning to his own way. The conscience is like a stone lodged deep in the shoe of the soul, making every step painful until it is confessed and forgiven. Some try to silence it with distractions, as a man might sing loudly to forget his blistered feet. But the ache returns, for guilt is a teacher that refuses dismissal. It is the first weight, the one that presses us toward the cross. Yet not all burdens are born of our own folly. There are sorrows thrust upon us by a world groaning under its ancient curse, illness, bereavement, disappointments that cut the heart in two. These too are burdens, but they are not without purpose. Indeed, God often allows the weight of suffering to act as ballast in the soul, keeping it steady against the winds of pride. Were our path too easy, we would imagine we had no need of heaven, no longing for home. And still there are other burdens, lighter yet constant, the duties of love. To carry another's grief, to intercede for the world in prayer, to resist temptation when no one watches, these are not weights imposed by sin, but gifts entrusted to the faithful. And though they press upon us, they also ennoble us, for they teach us what it means to bear the image of Christ, who himself bore the heaviest burden of all upon Calvary. Think then of the pilgrim's burden not merely as a load, but as a seal. It marks us as travelers who belong to another country. The world may not understand why we carry such weight. They may mock the pilgrim, calling him foolish for refusing to cast off duty, conscience, and sacrifice in favor of ease. Yet the pilgrim knows what others forget, that he is not walking in circles, but toward a city whose gates are pearl, and whose light never fades. The burden is not forever. It is the necessary weight of the journey, destined to be laid down at the very threshold of joy. Here lies the great comfort. The burden that seems unbearable is not carried alone. Christ has already shouldered the heaviest part. What remains is fitted to our strength, and even in our weakness, he lends his own power. As Augustine once prayed, "Command what you will, and give what you command." Our load is never greater than his grace. And so, dear friends, when your heart trembles beneath the weight you bear, remember that each step forward is a step nearer the place where burdens are set down forever. Even now they are shaping you for glory, chiseling your soul to fit into the eternal architecture of God's kingdom. One day you shall look back and see that the very stones that bruised your feet became the pathway into paradise. The pilgrim's burden, if rightly understood, is not only a matter of weight, but also of transformation. Consider how a pack carried long enough shapes the one who bears it. Shoulders broaden, muscles strengthen, endurance grows. Likewise, the spiritual burdens we carry, though they bow us down at times, also remake us from within. They fashion in us the likeness of Christ. Each tear shed becomes a bead of sanctity. Each trial endured engraves patience upon the heart. Thus, what feels like diminishment is, in truth, enlargement, the soul growing roomier for eternity. It is a curious thing that burdens can be both grievous and gracious. Think of the mother who rises in the night to tend her child. She is weary, her back aches, and yet in her sacrifice she discovers a deeper joy, a love that would not have been known apart from the burden. Or the man who remains faithful to a thankless duty, day after day, finding that what seemed mere drudgery has been quietly polishing the mirror of his soul, making it more fit to reflect divine light. Such is the paradox of the pilgrim's load. It wounds and heals, it presses down and lifts up. We may well ask why God allows us to travel so encumbered. Could he not sweep the road clear of stones, lighten our packs, grant us a swifter passage? Indeed he could, but then we would arrive in heaven ill-prepared for its weight of glory. For glory itself is heavy, not light, a density of being too rich for untrained shoulders. God gives us burdens now that we might be able to bear joy then. Heaven would crush a soul too flimsy for its splendor. Our present weights are but the training ground, the rehearsal for eternal strength. Nor should we imagine that all burdens are carried grimly. There is, strange as it sounds, a gladness in bearing them. The saints have often spoken of a lightness in their load, even when suffering greatly. This is no denial of pain, but rather a recognition that love transforms it. To carry something for one you love changes the meaning of the task. The same bucket of water feels heavy when borne for a stranger, but strangely lighter when borne for a beloved. So too, when we shoulder our crosses for Christ, what was bitter becomes sweet, and what was wearying becomes holy. But how easily we forget this. We set down the burden of prayer for distraction, the burden of obedience for compromise, the burden of faithfulness for comfort, and in so doing, we lose not weight but wings. The burden was never meant to cripple but to lift. When abandoned, it does not vanish but becomes a chain. The pilgrim who discards his pack soon finds himself lost in shadowy woods, where every false path promises relief, but leads only to deeper weariness. Yet hope remains, for Christ himself comes alongside the faltering traveler. He does not mock our weakness, but strengthens it. His promise is steady. Come unto me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Rest, yes, but notice that he does not say we will be left entirely unburdened in this life. Rather, he offers an exchange. His yoke for ours, his burden for ours. And what is his burden but love itself? Love for the Father, love for neighbor, love that endures all things. This is the secret weight that becomes light, for it is carried not in isolation, but in union with the one who first bore it perfectly. So, my friends, let us not despise the burdens entrusted to us. They are not accidents but appointments. They are not curses but callings. Each is measured, fitted, and sanctified by the hand of the Father who knows exactly what his children need. And one day, in that final hour when the gates of the celestial city open wide, we shall hear the words every pilgrim longs for, "Well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy of your Lord." At that moment, the pack will slip from our shoulders, never to be lifted again, and we shall discover that the weight we bore was but the seed of eternal gladness. The pilgrim's burden, though heavy, is never meaningless. Each stone, each sorrow, each sigh along the way is woven into a tapestry we cannot yet see from the underside. Here on earth, the knots and frayed threads appear tangled, but in the celestial city we shall behold the design from above, and marvel that what seemed disorder was, in truth, perfect order. The very hardships that puzzled us will be revealed as instruments of a greater harmony. Take, for instance, the burden of unanswered prayer. Many of us carry petitions that have long lain before the throne with no apparent reply. We feel the ache of delay, and the silence can seem crushing. Yet such waiting is itself a burden that deepens trust. A child who must wait learns patience, learns that love is not proved by instant gratification, but by fidelity through time. God's silence, though weighty, is a school of faith, teaching us to lean not on sight, but on his character. Or think of the burden of longing, the homesickness for a place we have never seen but cannot forget. It is the ache of exile, the deep restlessness of the soul that nothing on earth can fully satisfy. This longing is heavy, yet it is holy. It keeps us from mistaking the inn for the homeland. Every joy here is but a foretaste, every sorrow but a reminder that the feast is not yet served. Without that burden of longing, we might pitch our tents forever in the valley of shadows and never lift our gaze to the mountains of God. There is also the burden of holiness itself. Many suppose holiness is an escape from weight, a kind of effortless serenity. But in truth, holiness is strenuous. It demands vigilance, repentance, sacrifice. To wrestle against sin, to forgive the unforgivable, to love the unlovely, these are heavy callings. And yet, in the bearing of them, we taste the very heart of Christ. Holiness is no mere escape from weight. It is the transfiguration of weight into glory. And what of joy? Can joy be a burden? Indeed it can, for true joy, the joy of the Lord, is too rich for the narrow vessel of the human heart. It presses upon us as sunlight presses upon a window pane, threatening to break through into fullness. Even our laughter here is tinged with a kind of ache, for joy points beyond itself to the eternal feast, where joy will no longer be burden but consummation. Thus even joy carries us forward. Do not imagine then that the pilgrim stumbles aimlessly. Every burden is chosen, every sorrow permitted, every longing sharpened for the sake of eternity. And in this way, the very weight that bows us down is the hand of God shaping us upward. For a man bent under his load often finds himself in the very posture of prayer. When at last we enter the celestial city, we shall not come boasting of our strength, but confessing that we were carried. The burden will fall from our backs, and we shall discover, to our wonder, that it has already been transmuted into crowns. The stones we bore will gleam as jewels. The tears we shed will shine as diamonds. The scars we carried will glow with resurrection light. Thus the burden is not the enemy of the pilgrim, but the secret ally, turning our faces always toward the homeland. And when the King himself wipes away every tear, we shall realize that even our heaviest load was, in his providence, light compared to the eternal weight of glory awaiting us. If we reflect carefully, we see that the pilgrim's burden is not only individual but shared. For though each man and woman carries a unique weight, we are not solitary travelers. The road to the celestial city is filled with fellow pilgrims. And one of the mysteries of grace is that in helping another with his load, our own somehow grows lighter. It is a divine arithmetic. Two burdens borne together weigh less than one borne alone. This, I think, is part of why the church is given to us. It is not merely a place for worship, though it is that, nor solely a house of teaching, though that too. It is the fellowship of burden-bearers. When one stumbles, another steadies him. When one falters, another lends a song. And so the company of saints becomes not an encumbrance, but a mercy, a caravan of souls, all pressing toward the same horizon. Even the smallest act of kindness, a prayer whispered, a cup of cold water given, becomes a sharing of the load, a reminder that none of us journeys alone. But there is a deeper truth still. The greatest act of burden-bearing has already been accomplished. At Calvary, the Son of God took upon himself the full weight of sin, shame, and sorrow. No pilgrim's load, however crushing it may feel, can match the burden he bore. And because he has borne it, ours is never ultimate. Every grief we feel is lightened by the knowledge that its heaviest portion has already been lifted and nailed to the cross. This is why we can endure. This is why despair never has the final word. Think, too, of how our burdens prepare us to welcome heaven. Were we to enter it with hearts untried, we might scarcely value its gift. But when a man has carried loneliness, he will know how to rejoice in eternal fellowship. When a woman has borne the ache of loss, she will understand the ecstasy of reunion. When saints who suffered injustice taste the justice of God's kingdom, their joy will ring louder for the silence they once endured. Heaven's delights are not diminished by our burdens, they are magnified. Let us not then despise the road, though it be rough, nor the burden, though it be heavy. For both are instruments of our salvation, chiseling us into citizens fit for the celestial city. Imagine the moment when we finally set foot upon its streets of gold, our packs slipping from weary shoulders. Imagine hearing not the jeers of the world, but the voice of the King himself. You carried what I gave you, and now you may lay it down. What a relief, what a glory, what a homecoming that shall be. And so, dear friends, lift up your eyes. The hills may be steep, the weight may press sore, but the end is certain. The celestial city is no dream. Its towers are rising even now, and its gates are open for all who persevere. Let your burden not discourage you, but remind you of where you are headed. For the heaviest weight is but a shadow compared to the solid joy that awaits. If the burden is the mark of a pilgrim, then hope is his staff. Without it, the weight would crush us. But with hope, the burden becomes strangely bearable, for the heart sees beyond the present heaviness into the joy that lies ahead. Hope, I think, is like the faint glimmer of dawn on the horizon. Though the night is still around us, that pale light assures us morning is certain. Now hope is not the same as optimism. Optimism is a kind of cheerful guesswork, believing things might turn out well because they often do. Hope, however, is anchored not in circumstance but in promise. It is fixed upon the certainty that the celestial city is real, that its king is faithful, and that his word cannot fail. Thus even the heaviest burden bows before the smallest seed of hope. A candle seems frail compared to the dark, yet one flame can chase back a room full of shadows. And is it not true that burdens themselves often awaken hope? A man rarely cries out for deliverance until he feels the weight of his chains. A woman rarely longs for heaven until earth has pierced her with its thorns. The aching back and weary feet stir within us a yearning for a country without pain. Were this world too comfortable, we might mistake it for our home and never lift our eyes. The very heaviness of our burdens proves that we are meant for somewhere else. Still, we must be honest. There are days when the pilgrim staggers, when the load seems too great, when despair whispers that the road will never end. In such moments, memory is our friend, for the scriptures remind us that many have walked this path before. Abraham carried the burden of waiting, Moses the burden of leadership, David the burden of guilt, Paul the burden of persecution. Yet each was sustained not by his own strength, but by the hand of the one who called him. If they bore such loads and arrived at last, shall not we, upheld by the same grace, also endure? And let us remember that even Christ himself, though sinless, walked as a pilgrim. He bore not only the infinite weight of redemption, but also the daily burdens of weariness, misunderstanding, and grief. He knows our road because he has walked it. He knows our burdens because he carried them first. Therefore, when the pack cuts deep into our shoulders, we may cry out not to an indifferent deity, but to a brother who has felt its weight. One day, when the gates of the celestial city rise before us, every burden will fall away. No scar, no sorrow, no shadow will follow us through those gates. But do not think those burdens wasted. They will be transfigured. What was once weight will shine as testimony. What was once loss will glow as gain. The pilgrim will discover, with astonishment, that the burden carried so long was already being woven into the garments of glory prepared for him. Therefore, let us walk on. The burden is heavy, yes, but the road is short compared to eternity, and the city ahead is worth every step. The pilgrim's burden, though grievous for a season, is always lighter when viewed in the light of eternity. We are creatures who too easily measure by the present hour. A single day of sorrow can feel endless, while the eternal joy that awaits us seems vague and far off. But let us reverse the scale. 1,000 burdens borne in time are but a drop in the ocean compared to the shoreless sea of glory. If one could gather every tear ever shed, it would scarcely moisten the fields of heaven. Yet do not mistake this for an invitation to stoic indifference, as though the pain of the journey were an illusion. Christianity does not deny the reality of sorrow. Rather, it insists that sorrow has meaning. Every ache, every sigh, every unspoken prayer is gathered up by the Father and woven into His design. Nothing is wasted, not even the smallest thorn that pierces the pilgrim's foot. It is all seed, and it will all bloom in due season. Consider also how burdens refine love. Love untested remains fragile, like a bridge never walked upon. But when love bears weight, when it endures through suffering, when it chooses faithfulness despite cost, it becomes strong, resilient, eternal. God allows burdens that our love may be proved and purified, like gold in the furnace. And what emerges from the fire is not diminished but radiant. Some will say, if God is good, why not remove the burden altogether? To this I answer, would you wish to enter heaven unchanged, carrying the same smallness of soul you bear now, or would you not prefer to be remade into a creature capable of receiving joy without limit? The burden is the tool of that transformation. Just as a sculptor's chisel strikes hard against the stone, so the burdens of life strike against us. The blows seem harsh, but they are shaping us into a likeness fit for eternity. And here lies another mystery. We often discover only in retrospect that our heaviest burdens were our greatest blessings. The illness that humbled us became the doorway to prayer. The betrayal that wounded us became the seed of forgiveness. The loneliness that haunted us became the space where God's presence drew near. At the time, we would have cast them away with both hands. Yet later, looking back, we see they carried us closer to the city than any ease or pleasure ever could. So let us not despise the road, nor curse the weight upon our backs. Rather, let us lift our eyes to the horizon, where the towers of the celestial city gleam faintly even now. For each step taken in faith shortens the distance, and each burden borne in love draws us nearer to the joy that no burden can overshadow. And when at last we arrive, laying down our packs at the very threshold of the King's presence, we shall find that the long years of carrying were but the prelude to an eternal rest. Rest not as idleness, but as fullness. Rest as the soul's arrival at its true home, where no burden is needed, for love itself is complete. There is a final truth about the pilgrim's burden that must not be overlooked. It teaches us to recognize the presence that walks beside us. For the load upon our back would be intolerable were we utterly alone. Many men have tried to carry their sorrows by themselves, and they have collapsed beneath them. But the Christian pilgrim is never solitary. Even in the blackest night, even when no human friend is near, there is another who keeps pace with him, unseen yet unmistakable. The very weight of our burdens often drives us into his company. Without them, we might never look up and discover his nearness. Do you recall how 2 disciples once walked the road to Emmaus, hearts heavy with grief? They were burdened beyond endurance, for their hopes had seemed to die with their master. And yet, as they trudged along, Christ himself drew near and walked with them, though their eyes were slow to recognize him. So it is with us. The burden blinds us at first, but later we find that he was there all along, carrying more than we ever knew. Our packs do not vanish, but they grow lighter because his hands steady them. And here is the marvel. What we carry to the celestial city is, in truth, carried by God himself. We imagine we are bearing the load of obedience, of suffering, of hope. But in reality, grace is beneath it all, like a hidden strength undergirding our weakness. The pilgrim walks, yes, but every step is empowered by the one who never grows weary. The burden disciplines us, but the Spirit sustains us. Thus our journey is both trial and triumph, hardship and miracle. I have often wondered what it will be like, on that day, to cast down the final burden, not in despair, but in joy, to remove at last the yoke of mortality, of sin, of longing unfulfilled, to feel the shoulders that once stooped beneath the pack lifted into freedom, and then in that instant to discover that the weight we carried has been transformed. For Scripture tells us of crowns laid up for the faithful, crowns of life, of righteousness, of glory. Is it not possible that these crowns are fashioned from the very burdens we bore? The wood of the cross becomes the gold of the diadem. The tears of the pilgrim become the jewels of the saint. And so the lesson of the burden is not despair, but hope. It reminds us daily that this world is not enough, that our hearts were made for more. Each ache, each longing, each heavy step is a whisper from eternity. Press on, for you are not home yet. And the pilgrim who heeds that whisper will find, at the end of the road, not disappointment but fulfillment, not silence but song, not weight but wings. Therefore, let us carry our burdens with patience, with faith, with eyes lifted toward the shining horizon, for the celestial city is nearer than we think, and its gates are open wide. The King himself waits at the threshold, ready to wipe away every tear and to welcome his weary travelers with rest everlasting. The road, as we have traced it together, is long and the burden often heavy. Yet every pilgrim knows that no journey is judged by its weariness, but by its arrival. If we measure only the stones beneath our feet, despair will follow us like a shadow. But if we lift our gaze to the horizon, we remember that the path is not endless. It is leading somewhere, and that somewhere is home. The celestial city is not a dream conjured by weary minds. It is the true country for which our hearts were made, the place where every longing finds its answer, every tear its comfort, every burden its end. Imagine for a moment the final ascent. The pack that once dug into our shoulders slips away. The scars upon our hands and feet, born in silence, begin to glow with meaning. The trials that once puzzled us are revealed as steps in a divine design. And as the golden gates open, we do not enter as strangers, but as sons and daughters returning to their Father's house. It is there that the heaviest paradox of the pilgrim's burden is resolved, that what once seemed to crush us was in fact preparing us to receive a weight far greater, the eternal weight of glory. Earth's burdens fade, heaven's joy begins, and in the exchange we find ourselves remade. What was discipline becomes delight, what was sorrow becomes song. The very memory of our loads will no longer wound us but enrich us, like the memory of winter when spring is in full bloom. But here lies the choice. Will we carry our burdens faithfully, or will we cast them aside in despair? The road is marked by countless crossroads, each one tempting us toward ease or distraction. To bear the weight with trust requires faith, the faith that Christ himself bore the heaviest burden and now walks beside us. To stumble, yes, that is human, but to rise again, shouldering the load with renewed hope, that is grace. And perhaps this is the final comfort. We are not asked to finish the journey by our own strength. The same Lord who carried his cross now carries us. His Spirit lifts, sustains, and strengthens us in ways often unseen. Thus, even our faltering steps are steps forward, for we are borne by a love that cannot fail. So let us walk on, then not with bitterness but with hope, not with complaint but with thanksgiving. For each step shortens the distance to joy, and each burden borne in love will one day shine like a jewel in eternity's crown. And when the journey ends, we shall hear the King say what every weary pilgrim longs to hear, "Well done, enter into the joy prepared for you from the foundation of the world." And so, dear friends, if these reflections have lifted your heart, I invite you to share this journey further. Like this message, if it has spoken to your soul, leave your thoughts that others may be encouraged by your words. Share it with fellow pilgrims that none may feel alone on the road. And do subscribe that we may walk together again, step by step, burden by burden, until we reach the celestial city.